Hi everybody and welcome to today's episode of Building with OpenTok series. Today we'll be going over how to add live video using Swift and OpenTok, and we'll be going over an ARKit example just to show you how ARKit can be integrated with TalkBox. And we also have Roberto joining from Spain. Roberto is one of our AR experts and an iOS engineer at TalkBox. And let's get started. So as you know, TalkBox is the live video platform that allows you to add video, communications, and voice to iOS, Android. We're built on top of WebRTC. You don't really need any browser plugins. We have SDKs, such as the iOS one that we're going to be working with today, and different languages that we support, and a lot of frameworks as well. Next off, just want to talk quickly about the webinar series. This is a Building with OpenTalk series. This is where we go through every developer session. We build from scratch a live video application and related parts. And next episode is on archiving. We've discussed other topics in the past, like GDPR and customer interviews. So if you're interested in that, please go ahead to crowdcast.io/talkbox and register and follow us. Thank you. Today's agenda, super simple. We're going to go over Swift, just the benefits of Swift, the OpenTalk basics, the SDK, and then ARKit with TalkBox. I'm going to jump in and just go right into it. So Swift is a language. It's an open source language. Apple introduced it a while back, and people have been using it to develop their iOS applications. One of the benefits are it's easier to read and easier to maintain. You don't really have to have two files to handle, so you don't have to have an implementation file and a header file. You just have a .swift file. It's faster in many cases. You have a unified memory management, and one of the great things about Swift is it's open source, so you can track what's upcoming, the issues on GitHub, and obviously Swift.org. And tooling chain, and a lot of people use Swift for server side as well. So there's different things you can do with Swift. Next, I want to jump into the OpenTalk basics, and these are the three main concepts that everybody should know when you're building with application with OpenTalk. And the reason is these are consistent across all of our SDKs. So if you know this for iOS or Android, you'll know the OpenTalk basics for everything. So a session is where it's like a chat room, like right now we're in a session. It has a unique ID, so folks who only have access to this session can see it. It's generated by your app server or your account dashboard, and I'll show you how to do that on the account dashboard today. And this is where people can publish and subscribe to their video streams. So just think of it as a chat room that's limited by authentication. And that authentication is a token. And a token is a user's key. So essentially, my key into this session, it expires after a certain period of time, and you can add metadata to it that describes the client, but probably not any personal identifying data that you want to add there. So it's just your key to your session. And publishing and subscribing, these are just two ways of thinking about it. I'm publishing my video, and for those of you who are looking at me, you're subscribing to my video. That's how simple it is. You can publish audio and video, or one of each, or none if you really want it. And then on the other end, you could choose to subscribe to my video only, or to the audio, or a screen share if you're looking at that. Any video stream, essentially. So this is what the whole API model looks like. As you can see, we have a session and the clients, and each of those clients are publishing and subscribing right here. And then this is the app server that generates the session IDs and tokens, which are distributed to the clients that they can use. Awesome. So if you do have any questions about these, feel free to add them to the questions, and make sure to answer the polls and use the Ask a Question to get answers from Roberto and I at the end of the session. I'm actually going to go ahead and shift over to a couple of links that I want to show you and start building. And then we'll come back and visit ARKit with Roberto at the in the middle of this session, essentially. So I'm switching my tab to Developer Center. This is where you have all the resources available to you on how to build with TalkBox, and that includes our server SDKs, our client SDKs, our tool chains, so the playground tool, the session inspector, and such. And then your TalkBox dashboard here, this is where you'll be generating your accounts, you'll be creating an embeds project or a live video API, getting your credentials, your API key and secret, and tracking your usage data, and any insights that you want to track that are available in the dashboard. So I'm actually going to go ahead and open up my Xcode project and create a new project. So for those of you that can see this, make sure to click on a single view project for this simple application. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, but I'm going to give it a product name. I'm going to call it OpenTok Swift. And let's give this name, and we can go here, next, and I'm going to actually go ahead and store it into this building with OpenTok folder that I have on my desktop. So Apple Xcode generates this for you, all this structure right here. We're going to go into our ViewController here in just a little bit. Before we get there, I'm going to shift over to my terminal, and I'm going to see. So here it is. We have our OpenTok Swift, and zoom in just a little more. And I'm into this OpenTok Swift, and now I'm going to go ahead and create a pod file. So this is how you can grab the OpenTok library, the SDK, and you can use CocoaPod. So that's what I'm going to be using on this one. And since I have this, I just created my pod file. I'm going to go ahead and open up the pod file in my code editor so I can show you how to install it. And let's go ahead and zoom in a bunch more. There you go. For the sake of this demo, we're going to Swift a UI test. So we're just going to say, okay, pod, and this is our dependency, OpenTok. I'm going to go ahead and just save that. Next, I'm going to switch back to our beautiful terminal and then go pod install. As simple as that, and now that should be opening up and downloading our SDK for us. I'm going to go ahead and clear out of there, and let's go ahead and actually open our OpenTok Swift Xcode workspace file. So the workspace file is what you need since you're going to be working with CocoaPods. And oh, it's just gonna give it a second while it processes this and opens up. I'm gonna go ahead and close this. So I'll just go ahead and open it again. Give me just a tad second. Looks like I had the other one open, so Xcode was complaining by not responding. Just joking. So we're gonna go ahead into our view controller and zoom in here real quick so everybody can see what's going on. And so we're going to keep this application very simple. So just going to go ahead and load up our SDK. And in the view controller, we're going to create some variables for our credentials. So session ID, and then I'll create a variable for our token. I'll fill these in from the account dashboard after we go through the whole code process real quick. So after that, let's go ahead and create a variable for our publisher. And we're going to create a lazy variable because we'll just have it load up in the memory as soon as we need to use it instead of having it allocated beforehand. So we'll give it a type. Oops, sorry, just a second. I got a window popping up real quick on my laptop. That's just okay. I'm zoomed in all the way. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove that. So we're going to give it a type of OT publisher, and then we're going to return our OT publisher instance, and we'll have a delegate with the settings. So one thing that we want to do is actually go ahead and create the settings out here. So I'll say, okay, settings equals OT publisher settings, and we'll get this right here. And in my settings, the reason I'm using it is I just want to show you how to add a name. So I'm going to say this is me as a publisher, Monic, and then we'll set our delegate to self. So it'll be this view controller essentially. And then here, we're going to just say settings, and then we're going to go ahead and return this. Similarly, we're going to do the same thing with a session and give it a type OT session. And we're going to go ahead and return OT session, and that'll be using our API key that we are going to set, a session ID that we're going to set as well. Oops. And our delegate. And we'll also set this delegate to self. And Now Xcode might complain just a little bit because we're not following the protocols, just like that, and we'll get to that and get rid of those errors in just a second. And to do that, we'll actually create an extension here of the view controller, and we'll say OT publisher kit, OT publisher delegate, and in this delegate, we're going to go ahead and let's do a publish. We're going to follow ahead, and we'll come back and revisit these in just a second. I just want to get rid of these errors that Xcode is complaining about. But essentially, for the publisher delegate, you need to have the stream created event that you need to be listening to, your error, and essentially your stream destroyed event for on the publisher end. So simple as that. And now we're going to be following the protocol there. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our OT session and the delegate. And here there's 5 of them. So here you have the stream created, and here stream destroyed, and oops, extra line. We have the session did connect, and it did fail with error, and lastly, it disconnect. So we'll be using these. So essentially, OpenTok will send a signal to you saying, hey, just triggering this callback, and then we'll have to execute something based on these callbacks. So as simple as that. As you can see, it's not complaining anymore. I'm going to go ahead and create a function called connect, and this is what we'll call after the view loads. So in this connect function, excuse me, in this connect function, we're going to go ahead and first of all, before we connect, we want to create a little error, and we're going to give it an optional. And then in this error, we want to also be able to process this error. So I'm going to go ahead and create a handler called handle error. Simple as that. And then what this is do is we'll use this every time there's an error. So what we can do is say, hey, if there is an error, which we'll just set to a temporary variable calling, we're going to go ahead and print this error saying there was an error, and you can print out the error like this. And this is all available, essentially on a sample that I'll be sharing real quick. So now we have this, we can say, okay, let's handle this error using the defer method. We're going to go and use our handle error method, and we're going to call it OT error. So now we want to do session.connect. And the connect method on the session object is where you would feed in the token. So this is, remember, your authentication to that room. And then you would just pour error pointer here. And that'll take care of it for us. So now after we connect, obviously we want to make sure we publish. So let's go ahead and create a publish function. We're going to call it publish. And similarly, we're going to create a variable, let's call it publish error. Oops. And we're going to give it an OT error optional type. And then defer that error as well. And we're going to say publish. So now you can see that the process is connect, publish, and subscribe, and so on. So we'll here do session.publish. So same session object, and since you're publishing in the session, everything is attached to that session. Either you're connecting to the session, you're subscribing sometime related to that session, or you're publishing to that session. So here we're going to go ahead and say, okay, we want to publish this publisher. And since we had a lazy bar, essentially when we hit publisher here, this is when it'll be instantiated in memory. And we'll do this. Publish error is what we called it. So it's simple as that. And then next, what we want to do is we want to actually create the view and add it to our view controller. So I'm going to say if let publisher view equals publisher, this one, and then the view. So if the view is there, so it's not nil, we're going to say, okay, publisher, oops, dot frame, and we'll set that. We'll create this, and we'll give it, let's say, x coordinate of 0, so 0, 0, and let's give it a width of 100 along with a height of 100. So now that we've done that, we want to add this view as a subview. So we'll do that just like that. So now we've got the connect method out, the publish method as well, And lastly, we should probably create the subscribe method similarly. So I'm going to go ahead and create subscribe method. And similarly, we're going to have a subscribe error. And so as you can see, I'm handling an error at each level just to make sure that I can see if something does go wrong, where it goes wrong. And this is something that we highly advocate when creating anything we talk about, just to know there's so many different levels involved that should probably handle each error at each level essentially. So now we're going to actually feed a stream in here. So we're going to say, because we have to specify which stream we want to subscribe to. So because of that, I'm going to pass it in. I'll show you how to do that. But we're going to go ahead and create our subscriber because as you can see, we didn't actually create a subscriber here. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, var subscriber, and give it the type of OT subscriber, give it an optional. And now we'll be saying, okay, a subscriber equal to OT subscriber, and we'll give it the stream that we wanted. So that's what we're going to be passing into this function. And we'll pass it through one of our callbacks that we get. So I'm going to go ahead and say subscriber error. So similarly, right here. And so now, okay, perfect. So now what we're going to do is Xcode is going to be complaining. So we're going to go ahead and implement the extension as well here. We're going to say ViewController. And we're going to say, okay, OT subscriber delegate. And in this one, there's only two. And those are subscriber did connect and essentially if it failed with error. So we're going to say did connect. And then this is where Xcode's amazing. It kind of fills in essentially what you're going for. And we're going to say did fail with error and perfect. So those are what we need to, those are delegates here. And we're seeing a little error here. Oops. That's because that should actually be the delegate. So my apologies, got a little ahead of myself. So we created a subscriber here, and after we create the subscriber, we actually want to now subscribe. So session.subscribe, so everything attached to the session method. And here we'll feed in the subscriber, and then this is the error. So as you can see, I got a little ahead of myself and I made the error. So happy that Xcode's there helping me out and kind of telling me, hey, this is not the right way to do this. And so now, since it's an optional, we're going to just go ahead and force and wrap it. Probably not something you want to do in a production application, but it's just the way because we know it when we call this method, there'll be a stream and we'll create a subscriber. So now we create the subscribe method, and I'm actually going to create a method, another one called add subscriber view. And this is when we will add the subscriber view. And what I'll do is, similarly to what we did here, we can actually just copy this and paste it here. And here we'll change this to subscriber view. And we'll call this our subscriber. And then we'll say, okay, subscriber view.frame. And then we'll just publish this. So this is doing the exact same thing, but on the subscriber end, because we want to be able to add this. Oops, because this is an optional, but you probably need to do that just to make sure. So simple as that. But now we have to make sure we have to call these methods, the subscribe method and adding to the view. So now we're going to say, okay, I'm going to go here. So when the view loads, we actually want to call the connect method. So this is what we're going to say, like this lifecycle of this application. We're going to call the connect method. So after it connects, and we'll wait for this right here, the session did connect. And this is what we'll call the publish method because we want to make sure we got the callback from OpenTok saying, hey, we've established this connection. Now go ahead and publish. So we're going to go ahead and publish after that. So publishing takes care of publishing to the session, and then we'll add there. And now if we have a stream created from a subscriber that's in the call, what we'll do is we'll just say, hey, let's go ahead and subscribe, and then we'll pass in the stream that we have essentially here. So we get the stream object here, and we'll pass it to our subscribe method that we created right here. So we can go ahead and subscribe. And now what we're going to do is saying if the subscriber did connect to the stream, and we should really verify this, but for the sake of this application, I'm just going to say we're going to go ahead and add subscriber view as soon as we get this call. So as simple as that. And the one thing I do want to change is the X and Y for these subscribers, because we don't want to put it on the same place. It'll be superimposed, and we'll give this a width of 200 and also 200. So far, so good. Last thing, obviously, we have to add our credentials. There's no way we can authenticate without our credentials. So I'm going to go ahead and grab our API key, session ID, and token from our account dashboard, and I'll pull this up right here. Before we do that, I want to walk through the process of making a new project. So I'm going to go ahead and say create new project, and you can choose embeds versus standard. Embeds is when you can just drop an HTML frame and get it going. So if you have any questions about that, check out our webinar on embeds. But right now, for this case, since we want to use the OpenTok API, I'm going to go ahead and create a standard project. And now we're going to call this, let's say, building with OpenTok Swift. Go ahead and create it. It's going to generate some credentials for me, and I'm going to go ahead here and generate a session. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a routed session, copy this here, and I'm going to switch that over to Xcode. And here I'm going to add it. And then I also want to create a token. So my token has to be based on the session ID. And let's just go ahead and say for 6 hours. And I can put information here, but I'm going to go ahead and skip that. Generate a token. Token is generated. I'm going to go ahead and copy it. With this command saying the copy has been successful. So I'm going to go ahead and add this. Now, lastly, what I want to do is I want to grab my API key here. And now I'm going to paste that API key. You may have seen the secret there. That's also, you should not be sharing that with anybody. I'm going to go ahead and delete the project after this webinar is over, just because you don't want anybody to have access to your API key in secret. So here are the credentials, and I'm going to say this is done usually on our server, because you don't want to, just because you have your API key in secret that are used to generate these credentials, and you want to do it on the server side, and we have 6 server SDKs that support that for you. We're just doing it through the dashboard, just because it's for the sake of the demo. It's just much easier to do it and manually hard-coded it. So just go over it real quick. We created a publisher here. We gave it a name, Monic, and then we created a session here using our credentials, API key, session ID. We connected to the session using our token, and then we published when we got connected. And so that publish method, we just pass in the publisher that we created, and then we handle the error, obviously. And then here we just add the view. And similarly, that's how the subscribing works. And let's go ahead and actually run this application. So I'm going to go ahead here and run it on iPhone 8. And just waiting for this to build real quick. And what we'll do to see this on the other end, we'll use our Playground tool. And the Playground tool will be able to connect, and we'll be the publisher there as well. So just a moment while that loads. And until we wait for that, let's go ahead and actually grab that session ID that we pasted here and load this up in our Playground tool. And our Playground tool is this amazing tool built by TalkBox engineers where you can essentially use all the features that we support and get it going. So we're going to go ahead, and I'll connect later, but let's get the simulator running. Ta-da! You can see us publishing. The reason you're seeing the kettle is because, looks like we had a crash. That's okay. And we're going to go check out what happened there. Interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and rebuild this real quickly and see what went wrong. Okay, perfect. And I'm going to go ahead and connect, and you can hear the feedback. So that's me on the other end, and as simple as that. So I'm going to stop right now. Subscribe to the video, stopping that. So this tool is used for testing out different features and stuff. So I can publish the video, subscribe to the video. I can do anything I want here in this tool. I can publish multiple streams. So if I wanted to publish more than once, I could do that as well. And I'll stop the audio again because you obviously don't want to get that feedback. I can unpublish the streams as well. So this is all that takes to get a live video application going with, which is compatible with using our JavaScript SDK, which is running in this tool, with our iOS SDK that's running here. So the reason you're not seeing me here is because I'm using two cameras to get this going. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect real quick from this session, and I'm going to hand it off to Roberto to go over ARKit and how that plays with the talk box.
Okay. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, there you go. Maybe Manik, if you can stop your screen share. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, cool. So yeah, if you have watched the WWDC the other day, it seems that Apple is pushing a lot to make all the augmented reality apps more and more good and adding a lot of functionality and a lot of capabilities to this framework. And if you saw the example with the Lego in the table and all that stuff, it was very cool. So let's try to review first what is ARKit about, just in case you don't know anything about that. And let's see how we can integrate OpenTok with ARKit, which at the end we will be showing a live sample, which I think it's very cool, and we will review in the code. So, well, for ARKit, so how does it work? So at the end, what ARKit does is to create like a virtual world of coordinates, or like a virtual world that you are going to render your scene or your 3D content on that world. So for that to work, what the inputs of ARKit, you can see that on the slides, is it gathers all the information from the motion sensor of the device, the accelerometer, the gyroscope, the compass, the altitude, or all the information that it has from the device, and also, of course, the image of the camera. And using some kind, well, that's what Apple says the visual inertial odometry, which is a very cool name. And that's like all the signatures or all the inputs for ARKit to create this virtual world system. So if you have worked before with some kind of 3D, well, not only 3D, because it also works on 2D, but it's this kind of game engines or this kind of virtual world engines, like, well, the SceneKit, or if you have worked before with Unity or Unreal Engine or all this stuff, you are developing like a world, and you are putting elements in that place of the world. Usually, if you are, for example, developing a game, you have to control the camera, and you have to move the camera by using the keyboard or using an on-screen control. So what ARKit does is to control the camera by using these kind of devices. So if you put, let's say that if you put an example, if you put, for example, like a car in this space, you can move the camera of that scene with your phone. So you are going to be able the car from the front, from the back, by moving your phone. So that is more or less how it works. Basically what ARKit does is to create this kind of virtual world coordinates and to move the camera around the scene. So we finally, at the end, you are going to work with these two high-level APIs for creating graphic contents. If you want to go with 3D, you are going to use a SceneKit. If you want to prefer to use 2D, you are going to go through a SpriteKit, and the output of the scene of both a SceneKit or SpriteKit is what you are going to see on the phone. So yeah, that is more or less what ARKit does. So how we can integrate ARKit with OpenTok? So we see two scenarios, but I mean, this is very wide because you can think in a very revolutionary solution, but we think you can integrate OpenTok in two ways. You can, since this is a 3D scene, you can render, I mean, for example, the sample that Manik has shown, the typical basic hello world, it is rendering the publisher or the subscriber view into a UI view, which is one component that the iPhone has to show contents. But the other way around, if you are using this kind of a SceneKit, for example, this kind of 3D APIs, you can render the same video, the subscriber view, in a 3D element. So imagine that you have a model, a spaceship, and you can move through the spaceship, you can go from, well, one room to the other. So you can render the subscriber video in one room of your spaceship. So when you are moving with your phone and you enter in that room, you are going to see the subscriber video, which is there. If you go to a different place, you are not going to see the subscriber video because it's just in that room. That's an example, but you can create another experience. Maybe you can want to render the subscriber on your TV of your room, of your living room, and then if you point to your TV, you're going to see the subscriber. If you point at a different place, the subscriber is to be in that particular place of the space. So that is one of the integration that we thought about, how you can mix Topbox and OpenTok and ARKit. So it's just rendering the subscriber view, and that's a sample we are going to see in the next slide. So that's one approach. The other approach is, okay, maybe I'm seeing something which is very cool, like for example the Lego example that Apple showed last Monday, and you are playing with that, you're playing with your car, you're entering the buildings, all that stuff, but you want to broadcast that, you want to show that to a friend which is not next to you, maybe he's living in a different continent, and you want to show that to him. So right now you don't have a way, because you might be ending by recording the phone with a different phone or something like that. But so this another approach is where you can integrate OpenTok. You can broadcast what you are seeing in your ARKit scene. So this, we have another, I put the links for both samples. We have one sample per each use case. And if you want to, we are going to see the first one, but if you want to see more details, you can go to both of the repos and you will see, well, how both works. So let's stick to the first one. So how we can make it work. So at the end, the integration is very simple. It's going to be more or less what Manny has shown, but just adding ARKit to the equation. But at the end, it's more or less the same. We are going to have the same OT session that Manny has just shown to connect to the session. And we are going to have the publisher and the subscriber, and both elements are the one who are going to be projected into our 3D scene. So for the iOS application, we are going to have a very simple view controller. We will see the code a little bit later, but we are going to have a very simple view controller, and inside that view controller, we are going to have the AR scene view. Well, there is a lot of capital letters there, but iOS have, they have the scene view, which is a view which is going to be rendering 3D content, but they created a container for that scene when using ARKit, and that's why it's called AR scene view. That is because there is a scene view rendering 3D content by control by the ARKit session. If you remember for the first slide, what ARKit is going to do is to move the camera around the space. So in that view, we are going to render a scene. That scene is going to be a frame where we are going to put the subscriber, and that frame is what is called in scene view terminology. It's a scene node. So the thing is that we can render our video element, our video content in any scene node. So we are going to use a plane which is inside a frame, and that plane is what is going to receive the video stream at that point. And we are going to do that using a metal renderer. If you look at our SDK, we are using OpenGL by default, but if you want to use a scene view, you need to switch to metal. So in that sample, if you go to that sample, you will find a metal renderer, which is, well, it's done for this sample, and that metal renderer is, the only thing it's doing is gathering all the frame information and rendering into a 3D view. So maybe it's good if you, Manny, can show the sample running at this point, and then I will show the code afterwards, because I think it's better if we can give an idea what are we going to see. So let me switch it back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Roberto. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and just build this application real quick, and it's building, and it will be ready in about just a second. And well, here we'll show you essentially the first scenario that Roberto talked about. rendering the subscriber as a scene kit node. So you can see my screen here, and it's running the application, so it should be loading just in a second. There you go. And we here, you want to see my screen, and running this through QuickTime and screen sharing. So there you can see an AR application, essentially very basic. The object that we have, it's a rectangle, and you can see Harry Potter, Lego stuff items right here. So it's super cool. And now we can see Roberto on the other end. So Roberto just subscribed. Roberto's waving, and you can see that we're rendering essentially the subscriber on the node. So this is just a sample application. Obviously, there's much more you can do with ARKit and TalkBox. And if you're really interested, you can also use our frame metadata API that we just recently launched, which will allow you to essentially send in information at the frame level, and it'll be synchronized when the other person gets it on the other end. They can use that information to do whatever they want, essentially build AR applications. So I'm going to go ahead and put Roberto back on so he can continue. So thank you, Roberto.
Then share my screen to take a quick look to the code. So let me, okay, this one. So, I mean, the code is very, very simple. If you go through let me make it a little bit bigger, just in case. I think that's fine. So yeah, the code is very, very simple. At the end, as we saw in that first slide, the important part here is that we are going to render a SceneKit scene, and this is the scene we are going to render, which is, well, it's inside these files, and this scene is just that frame. That frame you have just seen rotating around the space. That is this scene. So this file is contain the geometry for that frame and, well, the description. So when we create the view, we are going to just create the scene, get a reference to the frame. This is needed because we are going to run an action here to rotate the frame. This is the action that is rotating the frame. So we will get, at the end, this is like a tree. So we have the root node, and the root node will have the frame, and the frame will have the plane. And this plane is where we are going to render the video, the stream of the video. So we will save the node here, and then, well, the view which is rendered is an AR scene view. If you remember from the slide, this is the component which is going to render the 3D content and run or control by the ARKit to control the camera. So we are going to set the scene of that view to the scene we just created with a frame, which is living in somewhere in the space in a position which is 0, 0, -1, for example, and that means that in your world is 1 unit depth in the space. That's why the frame was, Manik was looking at the frame, which was just in front of him. And well, once you set up the scene, you set the delegate. Well, we create a session delegate. This is a thing that if you plan to work with both ARKit and OpenTok, you usually, Manik, well, this is not mandatory, but usually when you create an OpenTok session, like here, you set the delegate to self, because you can create an extension and you can create all the callbacks inside your class. You don't need to create a new class. But there is a name class with ARKit and OpenTok, because if you look at the signatures of the delegate, ARKit does have a session did fail with error, which unfortunately is the same method that we have in OpenTok. So you cannot, that's not a problem. It's just if you start working with that, you will figure out and you will say, okay, well, that's not a problem, but you need to create an object to hold the session delegate. You cannot place here self. You need to build a small object, which is here. Well, you can find the object here, which is all the methods of the delegate of OpenTok. You see that the method is the same. Session did fail with error. So that can create a little bit confusion, but it's very simple. It's just we cannot assign the delegate of the session of the OpenTok session to self. We need to create a separate object. So for that object, I send the reference to the node where we are going to render. And well, that's more or less all. You just connect to the session, create the session in the same way that Manny has just done and connect to the session. And well, this is the view will appear, and in this point we are going to run. We create a configuration for the, well, this is a world tracking configuration. For ARKit, you can configure here some things like maybe I can turn on the plane detection, or maybe I can set up the starting point of the space for the ARKit session. You can configure here several parameters, but let's say we don't need to configure anything for this sample, and we just create the configuration and run the session. This is running. This session is the ARKit session. So we are running the session to start gathering information from the sensors, start gathering information from the camera, and start rendering the contents of the scene into the scene view we have in our view controller. So that is more or less all. So the only thing is that when a stream is, the sample you show is that when a subscriber comes into the session, the video of the subscriber is rendered into the node. So that is what this method does, is when a stream is created, we create a subscriber. Well, we just check that the target node is something, the node which is the plane where you are going to render the video. And we create an instance of the metal view renderer. If you remember the slide, we needed to create a custom renderer. A custom renderer is, okay, for the subscriber, usually the subscriber add, like Manik does, you can add the view of the subscriber to a UI view, and you're going to see the video. But if you want to render the video in a different place, you need to create a custom renderer. And that custom renderer is this. And well, it's called Metal because it's using Metal instead of OpenGL. And we send, well, the renderer is here. The code is in the sample. You can check it if you want. But I mean, this probably we don't have enough time to go through the renderer. But the only thing you need to know for making it work, you can grab the class and use it if you want. But the only thing you will need to know is you need to send the node, in this case the plane, where you are going to render the video. And that's all. You just create the subscriber, set the renderer to a new instance of the node, and subscribe to the session subscribe to that subscriber to start getting information from the video. And that's more or less all. If you look at the sample, it's very, very simple. Probably the most complex part is in the renderer and in the shader, which is, well, the renderer is using, but you don't need to worry about that if you just want to show the video streaming. You can grab this class and use it. And I think that's more or less all. With this small sample, you get what Manny has shown.
Thanks, Roberto. So as you saw, Roberto did a deep dive into the code, and if you want any of this code, you can actually check it out in the repositories. We've added it to the comment section. And speaking about the comment section, this is where you can take a look at the poll and answer some questions. The poll allows us to, see what we want to put the next topic as for the webinar. So make sure you answer the two questions about building iOS apps and then also using Apple's ARKit. And then we have some questions, so we're going to just wait another minute and gather up some more questions that people have asked, and then go ahead and start answering them. So I think, so the questions are open, and we're going to go ahead. So that was a very fast minute. Sorry about that. So the first question is, we have a problem sending the landscape streams. It always goes into portrait mode to our front ends, no matter the orientation settings in the publisher. Unfortunately, I won't be able to debug a question immediately, in the webinar, but if you do reach out to me, monik@talkbox.com, I'll be happy to take a look at your issue and then see what we can help you out with. And please feel free to CC support at talkbox.com, so we'll hopefully get this fixed for you. Second question, when can we expect CoreML2 and ARKit 2 samples? Probably ARKit 2 samples sooner than CoreML samples, but I don't have a timeline for you on that, but hopefully soon is what I'd like to say. We did put the ARKit sample out last year pretty quickly, right after we saw it at WWDC. So we plan to do the same thing, and definitely keep a lookout. We have a frame metadata sample API that you can check out in the repo that we've linked in here. So that'll also be a really great way to integrate with ARKit as well. Next question, does OpenTok support presence signaling in video call for all users of an app to check online and offline status? Unfortunately, no. This is some application logic that you would have to build. So essentially, all you would want to do is keep a little object of who the person is in the call, and maybe have some metadata that ties it down to that one person, and you can put this in the token, and that token that you would generate on your app server. Not personal identifiable information, but just enough to know, this is subscriber 1 or subscriber 2, etc. And as soon as they leave the call and come back with a different connection ID, and they have the same, token metadata that you assigned, you could use that logic to create an online and offline system for your application. And this is done through the obviously in the session level. Does OpenTok support CallKit integration for video calls? Yeah, so we have a sample application, and I think Roberto just linked it there. So if you do github.com/opentalk/callkit, you'll be able to see our sample integration with CallKit, and we actually have a blog that we wrote about it, and we can link that in here as well. Now, in the ARKit sample, it is shown that a subscriber tap on the screen and then hit the test where started on the publisher's phone. I'm not sure if I understand, but for our application, essentially we're just rendering the subscriber in a SceneKit node. So I'm not sure if I can clarify that. If you could clarify that question and ask it again, we'd be happy to answer it for you. Roberto, do you have anything that you want to maybe take a dig at this question, or? Yeah, it's something that, yeah, so if you could clarify that question, please, we'll be happy to take a look at it. We're going to wait around a minute or so just to see if anybody has any more questions that they want to ask. Please do the polls, and definitely sign up for next week's webinar, next episode on archiving, and we'll show you how to record our videos, essentially. While we wait on the questions, I want to just go ahead and look over the poll. So our first question was, are you using Swift to build iOS applications? Most of the people said yes, of course. Others are using React Native. So for those who are using React Native, definitely check out our webinar that we have on React Native and OpenTok. And then for the vote that we got on not building iOS application, that's totally fine. If you build Android applications, we have information for you. If you build JavaScript applications or Mac OS or Linux, let us know and we can let you use our SDK. And then the next question, are you using Apple's ARKit? So yeah, as you can see, a lot of folks are just experimenting with it. People want to look at it. This is a really great way to check out both OpenTok API and the ARKit API and see how they integrate together. So we have the samples built out for you, so definitely take a look. File an issue if you have one, or contribute to the repository. These are public repositories and open source projects, so the code is all there for you to play around with it and build with. Looks like
about the question that Bjorn has said that, well, we are working in some kind of that idea of the new frame metadata API, but we are working on it. On that, we don't still have the code, but we are working on something like that and that idea. So the subscriber can touch the screen and the publisher will show that kind in a 3D environment. So we are working on that. So probably check it, our blog and the rest of the things, because we will be publishing something soon.
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying the question, and thank you, Roberto. So we'll keep your eye open. We'll definitely have something similar in this in the next couple of weeks for this. Anything else? All right, looks like that's it. So thank you for joining today. Make sure to sign up for the next webinar, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Roberto.
Thank you.